Thank you, Lisa. Good morning, Council. Welcome to 2022. Hope everybody had a good start to the year so far. Welcome to the first and special meeting. I'll ask Mr. Tifo to take the roll call, please.
Thank you, Warden, and good morning to all, and a great 2022 to all. I will start with Councillor Arnold, please.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Bird. Councillor Bird. Councillor Bouchy. Councillor Bouchy. Councillor Bradley. Councillor Bradley. Councillor Broad. See, Councillor Broad. Councillor Cook.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Ferguson. Deputy Warden Hand.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Loosely.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Bradley, I see you just popped on.
Thank you. Sorry, I was delayed.
Thank you. Councillor Miller.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Napper.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Rumbouts.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Stark.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Veen.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Weaver.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor White.
Present.
Thank you. I'll go back. Councillor Bird. Councillor Bird. Councillor Bouchy. Councillor Bouchy. Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Ferguson. And Warden Marriott. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Tifo. I'd ask if there are any disclosures of pecuniary interest at this time. Seeing none, we have no in-camera today, and that brings us to the open session. I'd ask for a motion to allow delegations. Councillor Dean, second by Councillor Weaver. All in favor? That would be carried. Our first delegation is Justin Chartrand, Senior Manager, Oscar Poloni, Office Managing Partner of Audit, and Katie Denbok, Office Managing Partner, all of KPMG Canada, will be presenting to the special meeting of Council regarding KPMG's review of the financial services at the County of Lambton. Welcome to all, and I'll let you, you're allowed 10 minutes, and go ahead, please.
Well, thank you very much, Warden, and good morning, members of Council. It's our pleasure to be here today to make a presentation concerning our review of the county's finance functions. If I may, I'm just going to share my screen to be able to sort of steer the conversation. So KPMG has been requested by the county to undertake a review of your finance functions. This is a review that was financed through the province of Ontario, through the Municipal Modernization Fund. And so when we talk about financial services, it is a fairly broad range of services that was under review. It's your typical financial services, which includes both budgeting and planning and financial reporting, as well as the transaction processing. How do you get checks out the door? How do you get payroll out the door as well? We also looked at your procurement function, which ranged everywhere from how do you issue a purchase order to how do you get an RFP, project management for where you're constructing facilities, how do you manage those projects as they move through. We looked at facilities maintenance, specifically with respect to the multiple sites that the county operates, and also the administration of the Provincial Offences Act. And there's two components here. There's the one side that deals with the transactions in terms of paying the tickets. There's the other side in terms of the prosecutions and the court functions. We really did look at the financial side as well. So we have issued our report. Our report is final. It has been reviewed with the county staff, and it really covers the results of our review. And as you will see from the report, there's a range of different approaches that we took to obtain the data and to look at the finance function. We did do some comparative analysis against some other counties that we've selected just to get a sense as to how you're staffed and what you spend. We undertook a series of process maps for key functions where we broke the steps down for how you get things done to look for efficiencies. We did look at some of your finance policies, for example, to get some sense as to what your policy environment looked like. We did some data analysis that spoke to looking at some of the numbers behind the transaction streams. So how many purchase orders would you issue? What's the average value? That type of stuff. And then fairly heavy consultation with county personnel. And there were a series of touch points, ladies and gentlemen, throughout this process. And we'd be remiss if we didn't thank your staff for their assistance and their cooperation. Reviews like this sometimes can be a bit unnerving, if you will, when people come in and start to ask you what you do for a living and how you do these things. And so we're very appreciative of the support and the input that have been provided by your staff. So with respect to some of the findings, which I've tried to summarize on this page very briefly, there's a number of good points that we've identified through our review. You have what we would consider to be a very strong system of internal controls. So there's very good oversight from a finance perspective and from an approval perspective. And this is always important for municipalities because you do need to demonstrate stewardship over public funds. What we find as well is when we benchmark your finance function against other counties that we've selected, you are a low-cost provider. So it's not that you are spending excessive amounts of funds in terms of administrative from a finance perspective in comparison to other municipalities. Now, that said, there's always things that could be improved. And so as a result of the process maps and other work, there are a number of inefficiencies that have been identified that we've brought forward in our final report for the county to address, really to be able to get more value for money, if you will. There is a lot of paper in your processes, and so this inherently causes inefficiencies as a result of needing to print documents, scan documents, transmit documents, store documents, retrieve documents. The systems that you have, really, there's a number of multiple systems that drive multiple processes. And so because of that, you don't actually get economies of scale. So for example, you've got 4 different processes for issuing purchase orders. You've got somewhere between 5 to 7 different payroll processes for capturing time information. And so in the absence of a single system, these multiple systems really do create inefficiencies. There are some instances where we find your staff are performing work that really is a bit of low value. And so what we would suggest is you're not necessarily getting a good return on that investment. And then in other cases, what we find is there are errors that are occurring that are actually preventable. And so what happens is these errors are coming through, they're making their way to the finance function. And so because of that, your staff need to spend time to fix mistakes that if they didn't occur in the first place, they could go do something else. There are other factors that we have identified to contribute towards the inefficiencies. In certain cases, there's some training requirements that could probably be addressed that haven't been addressed. Your accounting system and your software system, what I would suggest to you, council, is you've actually outgrown it. It's dated. It doesn't have the functionality that you need. It hasn't kept pace with the change in the county and the operations. And so what you'll find is you're trying to operate within a system that, quite frankly, doesn't work for you. What we've also noted is from a policy perspective, there are some aspects of your policies that create inefficiencies. And one of the things that we've highlighted in the report relates to your procurement policy, where any procurements $15,000 or over require a competitive procurement. When you look at other municipalities, that number is somewhere between $50,000 to $100,000. And so what this means is you're investing a significant amount of time in competitive procurements, where other municipalities would basically say, issue a purchase order and get it out the door. So from a potential courses of action perspective, some of the things that we've suggested the county is going to want to focus on, and once again, it's up to your staff to determine the approach, is there are some consultants admittedly we'll call low-hanging fruit. There is some stuff that's relatively easy to fix. And so what we've suggested is you go through the process maps and you go through the processes and make the changes that will give you some immediate operating efficiencies. We've also suggested that you look at digitization, so moving away from paper towards digital documents. And County Council, I don't want to make this a value comment, but there are instances where we saw forms being filled out, scanned, emailed so that somebody could print it out, sign it, scan it, and email it back to somebody who can scan it, print it, file it. And the short answer is if you digitize the processes, you'll find those efficiencies. We would suggest that you look at your IT system, specifically from a functionality review, to get some sense as to what do you actually need and how would you achieve that through adopting a new ERP system, which is a new finance system. We talked about the procurement policy. So we've strongly recommended that County Council look at a new procurement policy that changes those thresholds to better reflect municipal best practices and to give you some more efficiencies. We've talked about a multi-year budget process, which is allowed under the Municipal Act. It doesn't mean that Council doesn't approve the budget every year. What it does, though, is it consolidates the process, streamlines the process, and gives you efficiencies. And then there's other policies that we've identified that you may want to adopt with respect to longer range financial planning. And these members of council really are intended to assist with financial sustainability and the long-term financial health of the municipality. In doing this, we've talked about looking at staff that potentially could assist in terms of driving this, recognizing that from a resourcing perspective, they all have other things they need to do. So it is, in some cases, making sure that if you are going to sign existing staff, you make sure that the resources are available to backstop them. So, ladies and gentlemen, members of county, that concludes our presentation. To the extent that there's any questions, more than happy to answer them at this time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Poloni. Are there any questions from council today? Councillor Bradley, please.
Yes, more of a comment, and I appreciate your presentation. I've watched other cities, London in particular, with the multi-year commitment to the budget, and I've watched the torturous way when something new comes along, you're criticized because you're moving away. And I'm a big fan of annual budgeting and long-term thinking. But I've seen what it does politically, because then they have to say, well, you've moved away from your long-term commitment to your budget over a number of years. And even though you indicate, oh, you have the right to do that, I think it can put council in an awkward position. Any comments?
Through you, Warden Marriott, the choice of adoption of a multi-year budget really does come down to the decision of County Council. And it's your choice. We've seen operational efficiencies that you can achieve from that. I would suggest, though, Mayor Bradley, that we looked at it from one very specific lens, which is operating efficiencies. Your comment about the political sensitivities, I will be honest, we did not address. I believe that's something that if council wants to carry this forward, it's something that you will need to consider. Obviously, there's different approaches and different issues that need to be factored in. I've seen municipalities that have worked with multi-year budgeting. My municipality doesn't. And when you talk about tortuous budget processes, that's what we're seeing on an annual basis. There are potential risks and benefits that need to be considered when County Council ultimately decides whether to adopt this or not.
Okay, that's fair enough. I mean, there is no budget process that isn't torturous. But I do appreciate your comments. It is a political decision. And there is, I also understand there's benefits to it. Mm-hmm. But I do think it also can put council basically handing over the keys for 3 or 4 years. That's the appearance that comes from it. So thank you very much for that.
You're most welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Arnold, please, sir.
Thank you, Warden Marriott. I just was curious after reading all this information, how many FTEs are we going to save by adopting these new procedures?
Through you, Warden Marriott, we haven't identified any FTE savings, Council, and the reason why is because we believe there's a number of things that, quite frankly, you're not doing. So to the extent that you free up staff time, it gives you the opportunity to redeploy them elsewhere. So I'll give you a couple of examples, if I may. You have a number of financial analysts now who do very good work, but spend a significant amount of their time actually pulling documents and pulling data off for financial reporting and analysis purposes because your systems don't work efficiently. If you have those finance analysts that aren't pulling data because a system now fixes it, what you can then do is you can redeploy them towards long-term financial planning, towards the development of key performance indicators and performance benchmarks to demonstrate how well the municipality is doing. Similarly, we talked about procurement. A sizable number of the purchase orders that you issue are actually very low in dollar value. So to the extent that you change your procurement processes and up your thresholds, what you can then do is you can take your procurement people, and rather than having them deal with small dollar value items, they can do things like developing vendor of record agreements. They could do things like data analysis on the spend to be able to say, if we're buying office supplies from 5 different places, can we consolidate that into one place? If we're buying different products that are same or similar, can we have product standardization? And so what I would suggest, Councillor Arnold, is we haven't identified any FTE savings. The reality is in the finance department, there's 14 FTEs to begin with. This is not a very heavy department, particularly in comparison to some of the other municipalities. So what we've suggested is to the extent that you free up capacity, there's higher value items that you can redirect these people to. One of the things that we see a lot of municipalities getting interested in is the concept of customer service strategies and customer service policies, which entail looking at performance standards and performance benchmarks, and this is where you can redirect them as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Comments? Councillor Weaver, please.
Yeah, I think this is an excellent report. I'm glad that we've gone through this analysis. What is needed from council, or what does staff need to move forward with some of these things? Is there a motion required to start implementing this? I notice there's a transformation working group required. Do we need a motion to put that into action?
I'll ask Mr. Tifo, please.
Yes, good morning again, Council. Yes, look, it's a very good question. I think the best approach at this point in time would be to receive and file the report, and then we can then follow up with a report and a recommended path to implement some of these suggestions for your next council meeting.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Councillor Weaver, would you like to move that?
I would move that we receive and file this and request a implementation report.
Thank you. That's seconded by Councillor Loosely. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That would be carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to item B. That's again Mr. Justin Chartrand and Mr. Oscar Poloni presenting to the special meeting review of payroll and human resources processes at the County of Lambton. Take it away, please.
Thank you, Warden. Councillors, I am going to share my screen similar to Mr. Poloni. Just let me know when you can see the summary report. Can you see that on your screen?
I can see it.
Okay, perfect. So on December 23rd, we issued a report for the Payroll and HR review of the County of Lambton. This was similar to the finance review, a product of the Municipal Modernization Funding Phase 2 intake. The overall objectives of this particular review were different from the finance review in that we focused on the county's HR and payroll processes. In the first instance, operating efficiency and the effectiveness of the team. And then the second instance, we were tasked to assist with a needs assessment to inform a request for proposal to develop a procurement system or to procure a future payroll and HR system that captures scheduling, time and attendance, payroll, and general HR. We carried out this review 4 phases. The first, we initiated this project with management and established a project charter and held a kickoff meeting. The second phase was an understanding of the current state of payroll and HR at the county. That included a documentation review, identification of a series of processes to be mapped in the form of process flowcharting. We then held 16 workshops to map those process flowcharts and had an iterative approach to make sure that they were accurate. We held stakeholder consultations outside of those workshops to include some members of senior management and IT. And then we did have an optional online survey that was issued more broadly within the county staff only. Finally, we validated the process maps with the attendees of the workshops, and we moved into phase 3, which was our future state and our gap analysis. That included a human resources benchmarking exercise against comparable municipalities and counties, a policy review, a gap analysis of those 16 workshops and the resulting process flowcharts that encompass all of HR and payroll, as well as health and safety. And from that gap analysis, we met with management and process owners in the form of a future state design workshop where we validated our observations and our preliminary recommendations. Finally, we moved on to a draft and final report, which was also an iterative process. And we also fed into the potential RFP for this payroll and HR solution via the provision of example RFP wording, as well as a detailed tool that could be issued to the RFP to capture vendor responses and to rank and compare their solution against each other and the county's needs. Overall, I will give credit to the payroll and HR team who have demonstrated a very strong understanding of the tasks required to complete the goals that are set forth using quite aged and non-optimal systems. Similar to the finance ERP, there is a lot of manual workarounds. The staff are heavily burdened. The staffing levels within HR and payroll are fairly consistent with comparative municipalities. We don't feel that they are over or understaffed. However, there are a lot of manual processes that could similarly result in redeployment of these FTE to more valuable strategic and operational tasks rather than administrative and filing tasks within payroll and HR. We identified 5 observations. We've ranked them low, medium, high, and opportunities for improvement. I will call attention to number 5, which is the opportunity for improvement, which is in that the existing systems within payroll and HR do not meet the needs of the staff within the payroll and HR processes. And in fact, the county's position as a whole, when you compare the size and the complexity with the tools being used. The family of systems and tools are quite decentralized. They're not interfaced. There's issues with sharing the data between the payroll systems and HR systems themselves, as well as the ERP, requiring a lot of data integration, mapping, and reconciliations, in addition to a lot of manual review. We have also identified a series of observations, including number 1 here, which is a general lack of employee and manager self-service functionality, which is a tool in modern payroll and HR software that allows employees to submit their own requests from inquiries and reports on their own personnel status through to submission of timesheets. And these are typically workflowed in the system to the correct approvers, being supervisors and managers, who can also pull things like vacation reports for approvals. That's not in place right now, requiring a lot of manual requests, which is burdensome to the payroll and HR teams, as well as that injects a delay in processing time, which leads to, in some cases, a lag in timesheets and payments by 1 to 3 weeks, depending on the cycle of pay. It is a manual and labor-intensive process. There were a series of, we'll call them gaps, that we did flag in the process flowcharts. Similar to Oscar's language, we consultants like to refer to these as low-hanging fruit. They can be optimized with relatively minor process redesign. But of course, the big caveat here is that the biggest bucket of these observations can be addressed via a more modern software solution for payroll and HR. Similar to the manual process, there is a lot of duplication of effort and extensive paper-based records. That is common across most of the processes or sub-processes that we did investigate. There are paper-based analysis and archiving, lots of printing, scanning, signing, filing. There's a few vaults within county's offices due to the quantity of paper, and in some cases it's not legis or statutorily required to have hard copies for most of this. Similarly, the HR and payroll quarterly reporting is quite a large package, and it is very manual to prepare. So there's an opportunity to revisit this, to standardize this, and to determine whether all of the content within these reports is required. Obviously, in the event of a new system, reporting functionality should be stronger, and this could be customized within the system itself rather than bolt-on tools. Right now, it's crystal reporting, which is a bit clunky at times. Finally, we did flag this one as medium. It is weakness and segregation of duties and internal controls. I will clarify in that this mostly refers to call them system-enabled controls, or controls that prevent error and other misstatements. Currently, the duties assumed by payroll are quite extensive, and they do include conflicting responsibilities, like being able to modify employee master files, which is typically done by HR separately. However, the team has done a good job of putting in a variety of manual controls and reviews and checks to make sure that the risk of error and fraud is lower. But we have made recommendations on improvements to these manual controls, and we would recommend that where possible, system access and system controls and automated reporting be used in lieu of manual internal controls, which is not better practice today. I'll stop there, and I'll open it up for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chartrand. As soon as we exit the sharing the screen, I'll be able to see everybody. There we go. Are there any questions, comments? Looks like you're going to get off easy today. Oh, sorry, Councillor Arnold. Go ahead, please, sir.
Oh, thank you very much, Warden. I guess maybe it's more of a comment than anything, and I appreciate the streamlining of the facilities and the processes and everything, but I guess my single biggest concern will be, I sure hope that if we do change the payroll, which is the most sensitive thing that we do for employees, of course, that we don't end up with something like they had in Ottawa for the last few years, where they ended up having to do manual checks, and it was just a total mess. So I think that that's the thing going forward. However we do the structure and whatever process gets put in place, whether we do a parallel for a while or whatever. I know the last time we did a payroll changeover where I worked at, we did a parallel system until the new one was actually working very strongly. So just a comment that I hope that that's the way we approach this moving forward. I appreciate all the things that you can do to make it more streamlined and more effective for folks, and I support that. So
Thank
Warden,
you.
Warden, if I may, just a couple of points to Councillor Arnold's comments. In certain cases, this will be mitigated by aspects that are introduced in the implementation phase. So the first thing is, you're not going to really get a customized built just for the county system. It's more of an off-the-shelf system, so it's not subject to the same level of risk as if you were designing this from scratch. And to your point, Councillor, there's a number of different processes that are test processes that are embedded within the suggested implementation stage. The concept of running parallel systems where you run them under both systems to make sure you get the same result. The concept of what's known as end-to-end testing, to run it from the beginning to the end till it works. I think your points are exceptionally valid, particularly with respect to payroll, because this is what people pay their mortgage with. And I think there's a number of factors built into implementation that will address and mitigate those risks. So I wanted to bring that up. I know it wasn't really a question, though. So thank you, Warden.
Thank you, Mr. Poloni.
I will add, we did include guidance in the appendices of our full report, dated the same date, that does assist in informing staff the benefits of a modern solution. And also we've suggested that they do explore cloud software as a service solution. Payroll and HR systems have come a long way since the days of Phoenix.
Thank you for that information. Any other questions? Councillor Arnold, do you have another question?
Warden Marriott, are you looking for the same type of motion we passed just before, that we receive the information and then look forward to a report, further report from staff?
Yes, please.
If so, I'll make that.
Okay, thank you. Moved and seconded by Councillor Weaver. All in favor of that? Opposed? That would be carried. Thank you. Thanks again to our presenters today, and we'll move to information reports. Item number 6 under Corporate Services Division. Do we have a motion to receive these, please? These reports. Councillor Rumboats, seconded by Councillor Cook. Are there? I guess all in favor of that. Opposed? That would be carried. Any questions to the reports? Seeing none, moving to Section 6B, Finance, Facilities, and Court Services Division reports. We have several there. Moved by Councillor Napper, seconded by Councillor White. All in favor of those? Opposed? That's carried. Seeing no questions on that, that would bring us to adjournment. Moved by Councillor Bean, seconded by Councillor Stark. All in favor? That would be carried. Thank you very much.